Good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily today. I'm Chamberlain. What's up?
Bright and cheery Tuesday. I am Akil. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily on Channels Television. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
And from Abuja, good morning. I'm Maope Ogun Yusuf.
Oh yeah, today we've got Bimbala Oyarino who joins us to go through some of the headlines that we're going to be bringing you with the papers. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, quite a lot going on. I remember the last time one of the major stories was ASU, and in terms of how they needed to look at certain things. But ever since then, I haven't looked at the way things are going. Are you, surprised or disappointed? Of course, I know you're still expectant, though.
Yeah, what happened with the planned NLC ASU partnership didn't quite pan out well. I think the federal government was able to outsmart them in their game, let me put it that way. Because, it is politicking, and ASU needs to understand that there are other ways to approach this issue. When the politicians themselves learn from the university dons, on how to play this game, but on the field, their students seem to be doing better than them, and that's an unfortunate situation.
Oh dear. All right, let's go through the dailies. Let's start with Daily Times this morning and see what they focus on. The theme, the kicker there is insecurity. Been on for a while. Don't know who's not concerned, but look at the lead story on the front page of Daily Times here today. Aggrieved lawmakers insist on Buhari's impeachment. Senate not aware of any impeachment threat. Subscribe to the spokesman. What do you think of this?
Well, this is Nigeria. Let us start from there. The bar is so low as to how we score, the scorecard, the paradigm that we use in measuring success for our political leaders is so low that we can liken it to the likes of Charles II in France, who basically was an imbecile and he could not run state affairs. We could actually liken Nigerian politicians and the bar at which we set for them to that of Charles II. The point is, are we going to are we going to change the paradigm for President Buhari? Because we have not scored our politicians in the past on the basis of performance, really. Because if we look at performance, I would say we should have done this a long time ago.
But looking at the history of the country and how things have panned out, do you ever see this happening? Even if, no matter how they say they insist, because there are several people who think, well, they don't see them concluding all of these things. Impeachment, though.
Unfortunately, the Nigerian president is the most powerful constitutional president in the world. The office is more or less like that of a king, although it's tenured, I don't see impeachment happening following the dictates of the 1999 Constitution. It is almost impossible, and that is why we can afford, our politicians can afford to do whatever they like.
That's Daily Times this morning.
And that daily is Daily Independent, and this is the headline. Well, I don't know if this is NA related. FG does not know state of economy. Afenifere laments. That's the lead of the paper this morning. And guess what the writers say? Says Nigerian economy is currently in ICU. Asks Buhari to prove to terrorists he is in charge. We hosted a member of the group yesterday, and part of what he said was this. What's your take on this?
Well, unfortunately, the Nigerian economy has been sick since '66. The first coup started a process where I would describe as offsetting the system the British left. The Nigerian economy was built on, because, politics has to complement the economy. And the Nigerian economy was built on the parliamentary system the British left. But following the coup, and the Nigerian civil war that followed afterwards, the then military government sort of rejigged the economic system, where they dictated that no, states were created from the regional structure, and they said no two states should collectively own resources. And the economy was built on regionalism. So that itself created...
The economy or the politics?
The politics and the economy, they are intertwined, you can't separate them. But when you destroy a structure, you forget that that structure is built on something, or some things rely on that structure. But we rejigged the political structure without necessarily considering the economic structure that will work with it. I tell you, the development corporations, they were the drivers of the economy at the time, were destroyed. That's where you have the likes of Udua Investment Company that emanated from it. You had the Eastern Nigeria Development Corporation, you had the Western Nigeria Development Corporation, you had the Northern Nigeria Development Corporation. These corporations were the drivers of the economy. You remember that Awolowo funded the free education system from proceeds from the Western Nigeria Development Corporation without proceeds from crude oil. But today, the military government of the 60s and 70s created states without necessarily restructuring the economy to fit. And since then, we have been following the palliative system, patching the economy up until this point, and now we're in IC.
But it's more than 50 years since then. Shouldn't we have outgrown that? I mean, seeing things, we've had quite a number of governments since that time. We've had 3 other republics. We're in the 3rd of those republics since that time. Shouldn't we have outgrown it, rearranged things back for ourselves?
Well, that's the sad part of the whole issue. And my heart bleeds because, I mean, this is not rocket science. We're not reinventing anything. And I do know that our politicians understand this. But the political will to carry it out, that's where the problem is. Because, 2023 is here. There's no politician talking about the structure.
Will they ever? Have they ever?
Maybe when
well, they do sometimes.
Maybe when we become a Congo, then we'll start. Sometimes you need to break things down before you can build something on it. If we continue like this, it is like a sinking sand. We keep going down and down and down until there's no place to go. And the people will definitely turn back because, it's the law of nature. So I do hope we can fix this before things get out of hand, really.
That's the Daily Independent.
And from the Daily Independent, let's take a look at this Nigeria this morning, this Nigeria. And it leads with a story that may support your point about too much power being at the center. And the big story says, audit report, Senate probes MDA's 1.7 trillion naira service votes. Orders Accountant General to provide disbursement records. 1.7 trillion naira. It is a lot of money concerning what the service-wide votes are supposed to do, the contingency funding in the budget. And if 1.7 trillion naira cannot be accounted for, and the service-wide votes have a history in the Nigerian budgetary system. It caused the hula baloo in, was it the 7th Senate now, I think so. So what's happening here?
Simple answer. Defective structure. The federal government, the exclusive list is so huge that no single organization, no matter how effective, they cannot properly, monitor and carry out due diligence. That's why you have the exclusive, the concurrent, and the residual. The states have hijacked the duties of the local government. The federal government they've hijacked the duties of the state governments. We need to actually revisit the structure of the Nigerian state if we want to solve little issues like that of the MDAs. We're not even talking about their performance now. We're talking about remittance, So there's a problem and there's a need to sit down and actually look at this critically. And if anyone is not talking about this in 2023, they don't deserve to be contesting at all.
Now, there's another story that will interest you on the front page of This Nigeria. It recaptures one of the high points of governance yesterday in Rivers State, specifically the invitation of the Lagos State Governor to Rivers State to commission one of Governor Wike's many beloved flyovers. Yeah. And he says, handshake across Niger Delta, Sanwo-Olu Wike commissions project. Now, from the point of view of Nigerian editors, is this a mischief or is this a suggestion that indeed something is going on in this regard?
Well, knowing Governor Wike for who he is, I mean, he says it as it is. I mean, there are two ways to this story. He could have brought the governor of Lagos into ridiculing because eventually it became an issue of PDP is going to win the state and all of that with his guest on the seat. But then again, it could be an indication that
something is happening.
Governor Wike is trying to, leave the impression that we have that is going on, because I think there's an handshake across parties, and I don't know, it might happen because in politics the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and you do know that Governor Wike doesn't take lightly anything that goes between him and Amechi. So I do think that could be a motivation. But on the other hand, I think Governor Wike is a strong party man. I don't see it happening. Also, the APC needs to be careful because whatever they discuss, you can be sure that when things don't go south, Governor Wike will speak.
I wonder where that leaves the PDP. But that's This Nigeria for you this morning. Malpe.
Well, let's take a look at leadership for you, and taking this one because at least it's focusing a lot on how the economy of the day is affecting the people. Look at this. Nigerians resort to cheaper goods as inflation decks purchasing power. I mean, I haven't seen that word used in a while. Decks. You know, when they say somebody decked you, it's not a very good word to use. I mean, what I mean, it's good in this context, but it certainly doesn't connote good. And they have a number of riders. Food inflation rises by almost 100% in 10 years as Nigerians pay more for imported goods due to high exchange rate, lose purchasing power to economic reality. They also have a number of, I would like to say they have a infographic now on how inflation affects you. They say you're paying more for imported goods, high cost of credit from banks, from Nigerian businesses, Nigerian students home and abroad pay higher tuition fees, high food prices, surge in transportation, travel expenses, high energy bills, loss of value for money. And it might interest you to note that an item that cost 100 naira in 1960 is now charged at 567,018 naira in 2022. So really drastic changes that we've seen in terms of the value of the naira. May I ask you, how is this affecting you?
I mean, I would say that I could predict a trend, and I understood that there was a need to diversify income, and I started early. You know, unfortunately, the Nigerian state didn't start early, in spite of warnings from the likes of people like Okonjo-Iweala, Sanusi, former CBN governor. I saw this coming, and following some research that was done too when I was doing my PhD thesis, I realized that Nigerians are growing backwards, in the sense that a company director that earns, say, maybe like 800 naira in 1980, and today earns, say, maybe a million naira, is poorer than, you know, what it was in the 1980s. So these were the things that led to corruption. I discovered that one of the reasons why there's so much corruption in the Nigerian civil service is that people have grown backwards. What they could afford to do, I tell you, an average civil servant in the 1970s could afford to go on holidays, could afford to buy a car from what he earned. Over time, his purchasing power began to weaken, and that led to, oh, I need to cut corners. Rather than saying, let me diversify income, because there's a rule that says that as a civil servant, you cannot own other businesses. Where do that leave civil servants? Corruption. So we need to understand that the issue of corruption is deeper than we think, because humans will always find a means. And I think we need to start to pay the due value for labor before we can start to talk about addressing corruption in the civil service, addressing inflation and all of that, because people have become poorer by just simply depending on salaries.
Well, I'm glad that you saw this coming on time, and I hope that many people were also as wise as you were in terms of diversifying their portfolio. But, you know, that usually oftentimes never happens. But let's take a look at a few other stories. Just on top of the nameplate, PMB intervenes, approves Seplat's energy acquisition of ExxonMobil shares. And we're still basking in Commonwealth glory. I'm leaving Commonwealth Games with new record to my name. That's from Amushan. I mean, she certainly is worth celebrating alongside other athletes that have brought this country so much pride. How did you feel about the performance of our athletes at the Commonwealth Games?
I mean, for once, there's something to smile about. There's something to be proud of as a Nigerian. We've not had that in a long time, since the 1996 glory. I don't think we've had anything that can be compared to what Hamilton achieved for us. And there's a need. You can see how that spiraled and motivated the athletes at the Commonwealth Games, you know. And it goes to say a lot about how we need to get leaders that can motivate Nigerians, because motivation plays a role in how people can understand that, for example, there is a need. I'm sorry I'm linking this back to politics and the economy. There is a need for us to buy Nigerian. You have to motivate them to do that. People need guidance, really, and that's why leadership is there. And I do thank Toby Amosun for, well, popularly called the Amazon, you know, for what she helped to achieve for the Nigerian state. It goes a long way in putting smiles in the face of, you know, Nigerians, really. It's priceless.
Let's leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Well, take a look at Daily Trust, the next paper here. I think it just kind of brings us back down to earth in Nigeria in terms of what we're facing. And, I'm not sure you can smile about this one. If you look at Daily Trust, look at that now. How FG injected 247 billion naira subsidy to salvage low electricity generation. And then the writer says, 1 trillion naira power consumed in 16 months. Poor payments trajectory can be reversed, ascribed to experts. So, same power sector. You see billions and billions, and you wonder what's the output.
Well, I think as an advice, we should reserve the good story for the last hour. I mean, this just took me up and then down again. It's unfortunate. I do not think it costs so much to get power right. We've been here before. You remember during President Olusegun Obasanjo's $16 billion in fund injection into the electricity sector, and nothing came out of it. You know, there's a need to properly privatize that sector. You know, if the telecom privatization exercise was badly managed, we would have gotten the same, because what I think is happening with Nigeria is we use socialist approach, socialist psychology in a capitalist system. It is a problem. You see, the major reason why capitalism will regulate itself is because there's competition. In the power sector, the way it was structured, there's no room for competition. And when you have that in a capitalist system, it becomes, because humans, I see humans from the realist perspective. That is, I see them as, people who would naturally do bad if nothing is there to curtail them. Humans are psychologically egoistic people, and when you don't regulate that egoism, they would actually do that which is wrong.
So in this sector, it appears as though we created regional monopolies who felt they were not answerable to anyone. Customer service was almost non-existent in many of those cases.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that sector can be salvaged, no matter what anybody thinks, because there are several people who have preferred solutions, but they're not just carrying them out.
Well, Fashola already mentioned that one of the reasons why it is difficult to do anything in that sector when he was power minister is because of the agreement that was signed. There's a timeline there's a time frame to it, and nothing can be done until they exhaust that timeline.
So what's going to happen to us while we wait?
Well, we have to just wait.
That was with the discos, but the Gencos, the transmission companies, they can boost the capacity. Because they tell us at some point we generated, 7,000 megawatts, but we didn't have the capacity to transmit it, and so it was stranded.
Everything is connected. So, if for you to fix generation, you have to fix transmission. If you fix transmission, you fix distribution. So everything is sort of connected. So if the discos are not ready to inject the needed funds to, because if we generate 10,000 megawatts that we currently generate, we can only transmit less than 5,000 megawatts, and this is a problem. So if the Gencos generate more power, there will still be a challenge of transmission.
So when the agreement of the discos now expire, will the tripod of power, generation, transmission, distribution still be realistic?
Well, except we have the right people in place, we'll still come back to this.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this.
Maybe you should wrap around the next paper, because that's the daily trust.
Because imagine I have inverter at home. I have 10,000 capacity, power, and I don't have cables to move it into my house for use. I'm still trying to wrap my head. Maybe it's too I've simplified it too much.
And that's a good way to look at it, really.
Well, they can work in this country. There are people who can make it work, period. So nobody should tell us it can't work, it cannot work. It can work.
Let's move on. Let's just move on, please. Let's just move on.
We're not different from other countries out there.
Yes, I agree with you.
Somebody said it wasn't rocket science
Can
some years ago.
Nigeria News Direct. Controversy trails Buhari's it's still the energy sector. But anyway, controversy trails Buhari's approval of ExxonMobil Seplat assets acquisition deal as upstream regulator CEO rejects assent. Ministerial assent completes transfer deal, according to official, still, as the word says, controversy.
Well, I think it's a good thing the president actually approved the deal. The NNPC must understand that they are now a limited liability company and they must be ready to compete. The days where they controlled everything without necessarily being productive or earning their place in the sector is gone now. So they need to compete with the giants in the sector. I think the president, made a good decision by actually, because when you look at it, I believe that in simple terms, when you want to grow an economy, just pursue mercantilism. Let your people own more of the assets in the economy. That's the way, and ensure that you export more than you import. Simple economics, and by Seplat owning or buying major shares in ExxonMobil, I think it is a good thing for Nigeria because Seplat is a Nigerian company, and I do think that is the way to go. I hope Nigeria doesn't happen to their assets ExxonMobil is leaving behind.
Yeah, because they're divesting, so I think they're moving to other countries. But they say they will continue their deep water operations and things like that. So, and one thing we need to be concerned about is, in the last 10 years, 20 years, how much investment has come into the oil and gas sector, which is the mainstay of our economy, compared to other African countries who also have some of them say they overtaken Nigeria in terms of crude and in that sector. So lessons learned. PIA or not, they still have problems with PIA anyway, trying to work out some key areas. But, oh dear, it just never ends, really. But
everything is connected.
Yeah.
Functionalism.
So in that case, let's connect the dots. Well, that's it. When they look at some of the dailies here this morning with Dr. Abimbola Oyarin, who is the research of the Research Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. He's a researcher with them. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, back in a moment. Don't go away. Now, it appears many have raised concerns about the contributory pension scheme with respect or in consideration of the other schemes. So well, let's get to Abuja and hear them out. Nakwe?
Thank you, Chamberlain. Indeed, the contributory pension scheme came to take over the old defined benefits pension scheme, and some of its objectives were to establish sustainable pension system, to empower the worker to gain control over his retirement savings account. It minimizes the incentives for early retirement, ensure transparent and efficient management of pension funds, promotes a savings culture, secures compliance by all affected, and promotes wider coverage, establishes strong regulatory and supervisory framework with the establishment of the National Pension Commission. But in recent times, we've seen that a number of bodies have now started seeking to opt out of the National Pension Scheme, which is managed by the Pension Commission. The question is why? What precisely is making them want to come out of it? We have this morning Comrade Silva C. Wanwu, who is the National Chairman, Nigerian Union of Pensioners, Contributory Pension Scheme Sector. And we also have with us Comrade Boboy Kaigama, who is a former Trade Union Congress President. Gentlemen, welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
It's my pleasure. Yes.
What is this that we're hearing about permanent secretaries not wanting to be a part of this pension scheme? We've also had a number of other bodies, you know, especially of that of the National Assembly, the civil servants there saying, no, we don't want to be a part. I mean, we don't want to be under the executive. We are supposed to be an independent arm of government. People are wondering what exactly is raising this controversy. You know, why, first and foremost, do permanent secretaries want to opt out of the scheme? Do you have any answers? Let me start with you, sir.
Okay. It's not that they want to opt out. Mm-hmm. They are not in it from the onset. Unfortunately, they are the policymakers, the people that brought the idea to the federal government.
What do you mean by they were not in it in the first instance? Were they not regular civil servants at some point?
Well, what I'm saying is this. From the very onset, after presenting this policy to the government, they smartly exempted themselves.
There's the permanent secretaries.
Permanent secretaries, the retired head of service, the services of the Federation, and accountant generals, those class of...
Well, the way I'm looking at, why I'm asking this question, I mean, a permanent secretary, in 2004 was when the scheme was finally passed into law. It was reviewed in 2014. The permanent secretaries who suggested this at the time and finally saw its passage are not the ones who are there till date.
Of course.
So, I mean that there are people who have been through the civil service. Oftentimes, the permanent secretaries are appointed from within the civil service. Isn't that correct?
Of course.
So if you have been contributing to a pension scheme for a while, and then do you all of a sudden get to a certain level and then you are not a part of it?
This is the big question that requires answer. I think PENCON is in the best position to answer that. But what we are saying is this. A precedent has been set
By
those who were PANSECs as at 2004.
Okay.
By opting out, they were not there. If you look at the exemption clause, it says the persons mentioned in section 291 of the Constitution, and mainly they are judicial officers. You understand? So the PANSECs are not mentioned there. The military that later opted out were never mentioned there. How did the PANSECs and that class of civil servants opt out of the scheme?
Big question. I'll come to you, Mr. Kaigaman, because I can see that you're dying to say something on this. But I'm trying to use my layman eyes to look at I've only heard of this. I have not interrogated it. So listening to your own submission right now, I'm asking certain questions. As at the time in 2004, some people would have argued that it would have been too late for people who are already at the peak of service, because you must admit that if you're a permanent secretary, there is no way you're going to again in the civil service scheme. You have reached the end of the peak of your career, so to speak, unless you are now appointed, into some political position. But when you are at that level, there is no way you're going to be contributing to a scheme that has just started. So some people would say it would have been excusable for the permanent secretaries at that time to have exempted themselves. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that. The reason is this: in the old scheme, there was no exemption clause.
Okay.
Because it was good for everybody. The fact that somebody has made an attempt to opt out of it shows you, it's an indicator that the scheme is faulty. So
even though you currently let me look at your title again now. You're the National Chairman, National Union of Pensioners, Contributory Pension Scheme Sector.
Yeah.
You think that this scheme is defective?
It is.
Okay. Let's leave it at that first. Comrade Gaigama, let's come to you. What exactly has informed this new development?
Well, first and foremost, I want to correct an impression that ab initio, the permanent secretaries and other top government functionaries have not been part of the contributory pension scheme. I think it's not right. They've been part of it. This agitation is a recent development. As at 2004, when the Obasanjo administration enacted this law, it was meant to address the problem bedeviling the pension system there. And 18 years down the line, this system has accumulated over 14 trillion naira. This 14 trillion naira has been plunged into risk-free or less risky portfolios. It develops the Nigerian economy. Now, for people to say that there's no system that might not have one or two problems, for the permanent secretaries to now say they want to exempt themselves or head of service, just like you observed, they've been contributing from 2004 when the system started to date. Then suddenly, because as an infinitesimal proportion of the public service, because for you to be appointed a permanent secretary, you must have been a director. You will go through certain examination, then you are picked and appointed. So if you've gone through the ladder contributing for 18 years, and as a permanent secretary, you have certain perks of office, and the law has made provision for you to go with your full salary. Now, the question is it the pay you are paying now from your salary, or the deduction of your own portion of the contributions? That is, for now, the law says is 8%, and then the employer, the federal government, is 10%, which is not fully being implemented. That is your problem. Remember, like I said, they are less than 1% of the public sector. And we feel they have all the privileges their offices have given them to sacrifice to ensure that we have the stability, we have the continuity, we have the predictability, and we ensure that these funds that is there is maintained and allowed to grow, such that generations of public servants yet to come on board, and those that are existing now can benefit. This is a system that is meant to protect the future of the public service.
I understand that.
So, for them to say they want to opt out now, it's not when the law started. It is now they want to opt out. It's rather the case of selfishness, greed, because you have everything. The law says that...
Oh, so you're not in support of it as well?
No. The law, Section 5, subsection 1A and B. Section 5(1)A says, derived that from the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 Constitution, Section 291, which clearly states that you can only exempt the armed forces, the intelligence agents, and the Secret Service. Then Section 5(1)B went further to say that at the inception of this, that is 2004, if as a public servant you have 3 years or less left in the service, you are exempted. But you have more, you make contributions. So this is a system that is, well, novel, but very, very laudable. I have never seen a system in this country that is as transparent as the contributory pension scheme. The only problem we have is with the employers. The employees' portion of the contribution is being deducted at source and remitted. Some employers don't remit their own. That is where you have problem. Then you still have what we call accrued rights. These accrued rights are rights that retirees are supposed to enjoy based on the fact that while you are working before 2004, there are certain rights you have that needs to be added to your own RSA. So if these things are accumulated, if you want to exist today, the system is programmed in such a way that before now, you have to go from one table to another to process your retirement benefit. But this one is an auto-pilot scheme. You don't have to go to any desk. All they need is your details, the codes, and what have you. By the time you submit these things, they are being processed.
Let me confirm that he can corroborate that. Is that how it has worked for your members who have left service and were part of the contributory pension scheme?
Yeah, to a large extent, yes. But the question asks if the system is defective, and I said yes. I didn't say that in totality. there are merits and demerits of it.
Oh, certainly.
The takeoff.
Yeah.
You understand? Okay, like you had mentioned, the PANSEX, there's a provision that they part with 100% or whatever, their exit salaries or whatever. The same thing in the old DBS, you see that these things are graduated. If you are retiring, at least once you clock 10 years in service, you are now qualified for retirement. And that attracts a percentage of gratuity as well as pension. And it graduates till 35 years, which is the ceiling. But now in the contributory pension, there's no such provision. And that's why you see the PANSEX and the other top government officials have refused to key into this. And if they have been receiving 100% of their money from 2004, can somebody now come and tell me that they have been part of the contributory pension? The answer is no. And that's why I say from the onset, there is nothing wrong with the contributory pension system. Any transparent government, anywhere in the world, will buy into it. Like he has said, the security of funds, everything is very tight, very transparent. But the takeoff was where all the faults started. We hurried into it unnecessarily.
Some people say that would have been expected. The hitches, the hiccups would have been expected at the takeoff. I mean, when you're starting a new system and you're trying to implement something new, you would expect some hiccups.
But with proper planning, some of the hiccups could be avoided. Mm-hmm. You understand? For instance, you don't categorize all the pensioners together. What I mean is this. Among these pensioners or workers, you have those by 2004 that we already due for retirement, mm-hmm. who have served over 10 years. They're a category. There are people who we are not up to that pension limit age. And there are people that were employed in 2004. We can call them the child of the scheme. You can now see three categories. So there would have been some portion of maybe percentage due to those who have, like he said, the scheme says if you have less than 3 years or less, mm-hmm. meaning that if I have from 4 years, meaning that I have put in 31 years in the old scheme, I will contribute for only 4 years. Will you now compare me with somebody who is employed in 2004 that will contribute for 35 years? This thing will work later. But they would have considered those that have put in everything in the old system.
Are you saying that if people only contribute for 4 years, they are only entitled to withdraw from only that which they have contributed for 4 years?
Yes, and including what is referred to as accrued right, which is what was due to them as at 2004 when the scheme started. So added together.
That should be fair.
And this will be used
shouldn't that be fair enough?
How would it be fair?
Because the person who joins in 2004,
okay,
up till now, I mean, I don't think that's not up to 30 years, is it?
But there are other things involved.
Yes, that person, if the person decides to retire tomorrow, that person will only be drawing from what the employer and himself have contributed. Isn't that correct?
Sorry, ma. If the federal government had given option to those who want to retire, mm-hmm. if it had been made option, I promise you a lot of civil servants would have retired, preferred to return under the old system. But this thing was forced on everybody. And the people that we look up to, those high hierarchy of civil servants, that would have represented the middle class, the lower workers, didn't do anything. in favor of those below, they were just after themselves. And that's why government itself have been very dishonest. The system is not transparent. I'm not talking of running of the system. Go to PENCOM, go to the PFS, they are doing fantastic work. But the government have been very dishonest about it.
Well, it still doesn't explain why, because as Comrade Kaigama said, this agitation by permanent secretaries to leave is a new development. It doesn't explain why the permanent secretaries want to opt out now.
He said they are opting out now.
Yes.
But these are people who are receiving 100% of whatever they were enjoying while in service. So they have never been part of it.
Well,
just a moment. Let me take this conversation to my colleagues as they have questions for you. Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Mokwe. I think I'm just going to allow Comrade Kaigama to respond to that, because part of the things that you said earlier, Comrade, when you began the talk, was that this is about one of the most transparent processes so far. So if it is as transparent and it was recommended by the bureaucracy, how come it's a section of the bureaucracy that still wants to opt out?
thank you very much. That's what I said. The reason is very simple. The section of the bureaucracy who have enough perks in their offices, who are enjoying full salaries on exit, still want to get more instead of sacrificing for the system to grow. Because if you want to opt out, I'll cite a critical example for you. When the military opted out, is a constitutional matter, because Section 291 gave that privilege to them. I am telling you that the 2022 budget is making provision of 577 billion naira to pay their gratuity and pensions. Now, within the same budget, that is if you go to the service-wide budget provision, if you go to the contributory pension scheme, the military is not up to, put the military, the intelligentsia, the secret service, they are not up to 304,000 policemen that we have on ground now. And these people within the PITAT system are golfing 577 billion naira annually from the government purse. Then if you go to the accrued rights section of the same year budget, it is just 125 billion that you are going to put as accrued right to service those on the contributory pension scheme that are exiting. Which one is better for government? Do you want to continue to budget? Sometimes most of the budgetary provisions are not funded. So that means if the budget is not funded 100%, those that you are supposed to dole out 577 billion naira to will not get it. But those that are supposed to get the 125 billion, obviously, head or tail, they will be able to get that. So that is why we are saying that this one is more stable. You can predict it, and you'll be able to do. So what we're employing government to do is, look, keep to the funding of your accrued rights. Then contribute your own portion monthly, just like the employee is contributing their own portion monthly. It solves the problem. It is very, very transparent. The PFS are the ones that are administering these funds. PENCOM is only overseeing, like Central Bank overseeing the commercial banks. The custodians are keeping custody of these funds. So it is a system that is, you know, in Nigeria, change is something that
If I could just ask you,
we see as if it is like an enemy.
Just a moment,
with
comrade.
Endurance.
You know, when you say this is transparent and all of that,
We have a pool of about 14.
I hope you can hear me, Comrade Kaigama.
2 trillion.
Can you hear me, Comrade Kagama? Now, the thing about this is that, look, even the National Assembly themselves, because now they're seeking to amend Section 51A of the Act of 2014, wherein they want to also include themselves in the category of those referred to in Section 291 of the Constitution, exempting themselves. So they want to come up with their own scheme. So if all of this was transparent, as you say it is, how do we explain this scenario from the National Assembly themselves?
Well, sir, what you are supposed to know is that the National Assembly members are no contributors to the contributory pension scheme. They are trying to insert their own kind of pension scheme, different from the contributory pension scheme. So if you are talking of the amendment, it's probably to put themselves in the Constitution so that they will be benefiting certain pensions. Like, you know, you cannot serve a system for 8 years and say you want pension. We have their own severance gratuity that is worked out. But when you say you want pension, a National Assembly member, probably a governor, senator, had been a public servant. You have retired from the system. You are enjoying the defined benefit pension system right now. But again, because you are at the National Assembly, you want another stream of pension again for yourself. So that one does not have any correlation, my brother, with what the contributory pension scheme is all about. Because they are not part, ab initio, they are not part of the system.
In other words, it is not right.
So 4 years.
So it's not right when they say that
how can you be a party to this?
So it's not right when they say, look, we want to exempt ourselves from CPS and onto the DBS because we are members of CPS. So that perspective is not correct from them.
Ab initio, they are not part of CPS. They are not.
All right.
So they just want to carve out something for themselves in the Constitution.
So, comrade, if we recall that the old system was fraught with not being funded in the budget, delay in payment for civil servants, they would wait years before they would get their gratuities. And now they are, you know, calling sector by sector for an exit, as you have rightly noted, from the CPS back to the DBS. Aren't they wary of the old system where the budget was not funded and there was so much delay? Or is there something that we're missing there? Is it selective? Is payment selected for some and it doesn't quite meet the needs of the others?
Well, like I said, in every system, you must have problems. This is a case of those at the top echelon of government trying to opt out. Then, on the part of the police, there's the police aspect. Like I said, those who want to opt out are not being sincere. Because if you go to the private sector are very, very diligent and follow the law to its little minutest bits. So they contribute every month their own portion as employers. They contribute every month after deduction, the employees' portion. So you don't have the problem in the private sector. It is only in the public sector where the government was, because the civil servants' salary is being controlled by you, you deduct their own and remit. But you don't remit your own portion. It's a two-way thing. Your own portion and that of your employee. So if these things are put together, it's seamless. So why can't those in government encourage government to meet their own part of the obligation, to make the system work seamlessly? Do you want to go back to the system where it is only relying on budgetary provision? And we have never seen in this country where government has implemented its budget 100%. In fact, in a year, if they've gotten up to 60%, you give them a pat on the back. It has never happened. So we don't want to do this. We want to go to a system that is predictable, that is stable. Whatever challenges that is there, let's put our heads together and solve the challenges. Otherwise, this is a system that is not only the government. The trade union side was involved in putting this system together. They went out of the shores of this country, understudied how it works in Europe, in other African countries, then came up and put this law in place. When a law is starting, imagine just in 18
I wonder
years,
if you can hear me. So essentially, you're acknowledging that government will be unable to fund it, even though senior civil servants are desiring to opt out of the CPS and return to the DBS.
Obviously, we had the experience in the past. That was why the government itself introduced the CPS. If we didn't have the problem of the defined benefits, why the introduction of the CPS? So there must be a very serious problem in the past. And we are correcting this problem. And you know the funds that are in place. Over 14 trillion. From government side, how much have they saved to fund the defined benefit pensioners?
But
They've saved nothing.
one other thing that would naturally, if you can hear me, comrade, one other thing that would naturally come on in this matter, comrade, if you can hear me, one other conversation that one can also have about it is a legal provision where there is some form of negotiation that is still possible in Section 4 of the Pension Reform Act of 2014. But we'll take that on when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Well, let me take this to Comrade Wewu. Both of you are giving us some information about this whole pension thing, and a number of people will be wondering exactly what the issues are, because it will seem like the law tends to have covered as many grounds as possible. Take a look at Section 4, Sub 4 of the Pension Reform Act of 2014, for instance. And it says this: notwithstanding any of the provisions of this act, an employer may agree, A, on the payment of additional benefits to the employee upon retirement, or B, elects to bear the full responsibility of the scheme, provided that in such a case, the employer's contribution shall not be more than 20% of the monthly emoluments of the employee. Now, already it would seem like the law already foresees a possibility where the employer can take full responsibility for the pension benefits. So why exit it if this provision is not there? Or, as Bukola asked the other time, is there something we're missing?
Yeah, certainly. There are variables. And when I keep saying that the takeoff was 40, these variables would have been considered first and foremost. Now, you are now saying that the employer may. It's optional. The employer may decide to do so or not. Now, we should remember that in the DBS, there used to be what is called gratuity, which is additional benefit. And that particular section, Section 4, subsection 1 or so, that you made reference to, is actually talking about that gratuity. But gratuity is entirely missing in the CPS. So what happens now is that gratuity that's supposed to be a parting gift from the employer to the employee at retirement has been totally removed. And that's why there's much pressure today on what we call lump sum. If retirees are allowed to benefit from gratuity that have been there, my comrade had just mentioned about change, which is not easy. A change that is not meant to enhance you, a change that is taking you from left to right or from right to left, will definitely not be easy.
Oh,
it's just like somebody being left-handed from birth. And suddenly at old age, you want to force that person to learn how to use left hand. It's difficult. Most of all join civil service.
But comrade, just a minute, because that explanation may not be exactly what this scenario is, because don't forget the reason why the CPS was set up, because the DBS, it was difficult for government to pay, people were not getting paid, and then they came up with the CPS. So if people are arguing that let them leave the CPS and get back to DBS, isn't the same challenge going to accrue? How will people then get their pensions? Because that won't address the problems of getting their pensions paid, will it?
Yeah, and that's where I say government have been dishonest. The same government that cried out that it has no money to pay to meet up with its pension liabilities. It's the same government that went behind to start opening the back exit doors for some people to leave the service. Is that not an indication that it has money to pay? And personally, I don't share that sympathy that at any time Nigerian government lacked money to pay pensions or salaries. It's just mismanagement. That is the fact.
So what exactly are you asking?
Right,
okay,
I think
go ahead. Yeah, what would you want to happen to get it right? Yeah.
Good. The contributory pension scheme actually will address a lot of anomalies. At least when you are leaving the service, their money is there for you. It is no longer subject to annual budgetary allocations. Now, the introduction of the payroll tax has made available a pool of funds that is there. That is okay. But we are now saying, before going into this, they would have looked at, decided what is going to be the minimum pension, for instance. Do you know that if not for some inner engineering being handled by PENCON today, a lot of people will not have what is called pension? Because one of the policies says you must not collect an amount as pension less than 50% of your exit salary. For instance, if I were receiving 100,000 while in service, I should be expected to have up to 50,000 naira as pension. But how many people are enjoying up to 20% in the system? Because these things, these variables were not looked into at all. There are people that their total contribution, both accrued and whatever, it's not even up to 500,000 naira. And what does PENCON do? PENCON will gather the whole thing and give you to go and take care of yourself. Ordinarily, they would have spread it for 10 years. Somebody has contributed 4 million naira, and we want to give that person pension at least for the first 10 years, should be expecting to have like 40,000 naira, or there are 30-something thousand naira a month. But what of the lump sum that will help you to resettle after retirement? So PENCON will look at it and say, okay.
Mr. Nwewu,
yeah.
That's where I'd like to come in, because it would seem like civil servants, employees, workers in the public sector have an unfair advantage over those in the private sector, or perhaps some others in the public sector who are enlisted in the CPS and are not entitled to that gratuity, that lump sum that you collect at the end of, your service with the organization. How can that system be challenged? Or should those enlisted in the CPS just accept it as like that?
Yeah, like it has been established, that there's a provision in that section that the employer may. We are now saying that clause may should be removed. And let it be mandatory that that additional benefit should be paid, which amounts to gratuity. I don't know if I've answered that question.
Okay, well, that again, it depends on the employers, you know, that are concerned here, be it public sector or private sector. They definitely operate differently. But I'd like to ask you, and I hope that Comrade Kagama might also want to speak to it. Now, there are those who believe that with the current agitation and, as Comrade Kagama said the other time, new requests or agitation by some segments of the public sector that they want to exit the CPS, that the whole system could collapse. The National Assembly wants to opt out. You've also confirmed that the other time. The police wants to opt out. The top echelon of the public sector wants to opt out. Public service wants to opt out. And who knows who else? So the question then is, what are the risks that could accrue should these pockets of segments of the public sector opt out of the CPS? What are the risks? Or is it okay for them to exit?
Is it not even a mockery that the National Assembly that enacted the law for CPS is agitating to opt out? Does it mean that it understands the law at all that they've enacted? You don't make law for a particular group of people. That's why you see the justice is wearing a blanch. It's blindfolded. Now, even in section 291 that my comrade cited, I've tried to go through the Constitution, section 291 of the Constitution. I didn't find where the military was mentioned. If it is there, probably the one I read was incomplete. I didn't see the top civil servants mentioned. Now, since government has started, because from 2004,
question that I asked, just so we can drive this home very, very quickly. Just a second there, Comrade Wewu. The question is simple. What are the risks should these segments exit the CPS?
If they exit it, what they are now saying, or what they are suggesting, is the collapse of the entire system.
Okay. All right, let me ask the same question of Comrade Kagama.
If it is not good for anyone, it is not good for everybody.
Okay, let me ask the same question of Comrade Kagama. Do you agree with him? Are there risks to it? You said the other time that the National Assembly wants to create an entirely different pension system for themselves. They're not even talking about that one. But should these pockets of segments of the public service exit the CPS, are there risks that we may or may not know?
Obviously, there is a very, very serious and monumental risk. I will cite you the case of the police personnel. Like I said, as of September 2011, we have 304,963 police personnel in the payroll of government. And a kind of actuarial valuation of this personnel showed that you need 1.84 trillion in a year to service their pension and gratuity in the defined benefit system. Similarly, putting it side by side, in the contributory pension scheme, the same number of policemen, you only need 113 billion naira to pay for their own accrued rights. My brother, imagine you are removing 1.8 trillion in the system. Are you not saying the system should collapse? Are you not saying that not only the system, but even the economy? Let me tell you, like I said initially, the 14 point something trillion is going a long way to service the economy of this country, because the investment is more in the benefit of the development of the government. So if you are saying that you are going to plug this out, what are you saying? You are going worse than what you have in the past. So what we are trying to say here is that it is lack of education. Probably we encourage PENCOM to, in their own budgets, to set aside certain sums of money to execute some of these people that do not even know the principle behind the establishment of the contributory pension scheme. Because when people talk of National Assembly, these are people not contributing that are not captured in the law or are contributors in the contributory pension scheme. Then if you talk of my colleague here, they are affiliates of NLC. NLC has been part. Yeah. In fact, even they are on the board of the. So when we imagine, where are we having this lacuna? Is it that even the personnel, even our members do not really understand the workings of this system, that we need to educate them, or what? Your labor center was involved in the institution of this system. And now you are saying that probably your labor center has done the wrong thing. That is invariably what you are saying.
Well, I mean, you're a labor man, so you understand how it works within the labor circles. But perhaps a refresher course might not be out of order. I mean, he acknowledges that it's been working largely. So let me get this straight. Are you people the ones now saying that the permanent secretaries should be exempt?
Oh, none of us is making any case for or against the permanent secretaries. We are all after the scheme.
Yes.
What we are saying,
yes,
from the beginning of the Pension Reform Act, 2014, as amended, Section 1, you see that the main aim is to provide a uniform pension
what I'm saying is,
now,
from what you are explaining, I mean, from all that you have explained so far, are you saying that permanent secretaries should be exempted from this scheme?
Why should they be exempted? Okay. They should be part of it. He made mention of sacrifice.
Yes, because you said that they were never part of it from the get-go.
Yes,
that's what
we understand because this thing is just like a forfeiture of a contract that has already been signed. Before I became a civil servant, I had the opportunity of working in a private sector. But what attracted me is pension. And now you just wake up somebody and the pension is no longer there.
But your pension is being paid, isn't that correct?
It's being paid, but paid as peanuts.
It doesn't come up too much.
It doesn't come up much because it's based on your contribution. And the contribution is a function of how much you earn. That's why it's poor. Those in the private sector, they don't complain because for the first time you are having a uniform pension system with the public and the sector. From 1961, it used to be MPF until around 1993 that NSITF, the National Insurance Trust Fund, replaced the National Provident Fund. So they have been at parity, but now there's uniformity. Why should some section of workers now up to leave the system without making the due sacrifice that others already engaged in?
Well, a number of questions have arisen, and I know that we certainly will keep our eyes on this particular one until we get further clarity on the matter. But we have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Comrade Boboy Kagama is the former president of the Trade Union Congress, and Comrade Silva Mwenwu is the national chairman, Nigerian Union of Pensioners Contributory Pension Scheme Sector. Once again, thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We'll take a break at this point, and then we'll be back to talk about the economy and how it affects you in just a moment. Please stay with us. Well, there's no gainsaying right now that our economy is in a state of distress. I mean, when you look at the 33 recommendations which the governors, 33 governors, we understand, made to the president on what needs to be done to save the economy, one of it, on the top of that list, is the removal of subsidy for PMS, which it would seem that no leadership has been able to take on. And then we also have the issue of insecurity, which is preventing productivity in many parts of our lives or hindering productivity. Some people are still finding ways around it, but nonetheless, citizens are unable to live to the full potential of their country as a result of what is happening in the land. And it looks like very little solution is being proffered. Looks like, I mean, from all that we can read, you know, there are questions as to what more can be done, especially when you read statements like the president has given all of the support he can give to security chiefs. What should happen between now and the next elections? And even as we're entering this new electoral cycle, how can we begin to interrogate how these problems can be solved? But I'm hoping that Dr. Oke Kichuku, whom you've seen introduced there, will be able to provide some of the answers. He's Executive Director of Development Specs Academy. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Today this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, difficult times we're in, and for anyone who is going to be wearing the cap of leadership at this time, first you have to ask, who are the people who think that this is the time to be taking leadership? I mean, do you really think that... Because this time around, you know, you cannot hide if you're a poor leader. Do you really think that, you know, this is an attractive position right now for anyone to say, I really want to go and sacrifice, and I really want to make things better?
No, for somebody who sees it as a means of becoming rich, it's very attractive, because laws are not being enforced as they should.
Despite how things are right now?
They're not seeing it.
You think that any leader can afford to get there?
No, you're speaking leader. You're talking about leaders with a sense of responsibility, people who feel that leadership is service. Now, supposing I'm working with somebody in public office, a governor, we travel only by private jet, in which case we don't know what's going on really. And our daily lives, we use Jeep as SUVs, and then we have security men around us. For as long as I work with him, I'll never know what is happening to the average Nigerian, and that includes my cousins and relations, my village people, my local government people, etc. So over the last couple of decades, we've nurtured a class of Nigerians who mistake leadership for privilege, who mistake personal preferences and impunity for law.
Yeah, but even even that class of people now know that all is not well. In terms of the resources that accrue to the country, we've been told in recent times that our debt servicing has now finally outstripped our revenue. We've always known that we have a revenue problem. We know that the pipelines in the Niger Delta are being vandalized. In fact, one of the headlines we read this morning is that Shell is saying that the elite are the ones behind this vandalization, which we're seeing in the Niger Delta. You have all of that. I mean, there are lots of shut-ins by these oil companies that nothing is really accruing to the Federation account. For governors to come up with 33 recommendations, you know that it is getting to a head.
I'll take it at two levels.
Exactly. So at this point, do you really think, that anyone who doesn't really want to serve will be coming to say, oh, I think I can still make some money through the system?
Oh, yes, I do. And I'll tell you, I'll take it at two levels. The governors have come up commendably with what they think will change the economy. So let's first of all interrogate them. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them. What has improved the lives of the people in their respective states in the last 5 years, in the last 8 years? They must answer that question. What have they been doing with their security votes that insecurity is taking over the place, or has any of them turned it down? Why did it take them this long to talk to the president, write a letter, to look nice in public about the suffering of the people? What's their position on fuel subsidy? Is we really subsidized for the average Nigerian? Is it not Abuja, Lagos, and a few towns where you have fuel at the regular price? Far north, how many stations have ever sold fuel at the regular price in the last 20 years? In the southeast, where do you go into? How many stations sell at the regular price? That's why they're so. So you find that the pretense that there's suddenly an awakening and everybody should harass Buhari to rule Nigeria well. How are they ruling their states? That's at one level. And you're talking about resources. Why would anybody be interested at this time? There isn't money anywhere. But that's if you understand leadership as development and that your budgets are supposed to impact positively the life of the people. But what's the reflex of government? We keep borrowing. I think 1.5 billion US for dollars for solar energy. Do we have the one we can procure here? Tax is going up. Is it not the same governors who were reported, I think, last week, to be suggesting a 20% VAT? Increase in taxation in an unproductive economy, in an economy where you now have officially a list of, they say, 40 million extremely poor homes that get regular stipend from time to time. And therefore, let's suppose in this establishment, the total staff strength is 500, and there are 110 who are extremely poor, who will give allowances. Some of them used to be farmers. They can't farm because of insecurity. Some of them used to do all kinds of petty things, and we're giving them money to spend, which is good. But productivity has declined. Therefore, there is really less to buy, and therefore inflation. There is no leadership that has the sense of national development in which our founding fathers, worked among their people and around their people. So grandstanding in the media, 31, oh, wonderful, we've told Buhari what to do. Mr. Governor, what are you doing? Take away people like Wike and one or two others. I can't see what all the governors are doing. Go to Port Harcourt today, you won't believe it's the same place. And it's not about Wike as a person. You go to one or two other states, you find what is going on. Look at Makida and his people and their politics. I can understand that. But to pretend that in a state where IGR has declined, school enrollment has declined, 14 or more local governments are permanently under bandit control, and for more than a year, you join a group to write a letter to Buhari. Are you not ashamed? You have a state where the governor has shut down the capital market for nearly a year. You have what's going on in Katsina, the president's own state. You have what's going on in Niger. You have Nasarawa, Zamfara. That's practically on a 24-hour curfew. And you sit down to write Buhari a letter. How are your people faring? These are the issues. How come the local governments that are under banditry are also getting allocations and that the local government chairmen are living here with us? No. Let's not pretend that it's something to celebrate. let's know that the entire team stands scandalized by the current state of the Nigerian condition.
Indeed. So we know where we currently are, and I think that what people are seeking to do is to do better. We know that the issues that bedevil the Nigerian state are not easy issues to tackle, starting from even the leadership itself and the expectations. So some people will say, oh, you know, there are always expectations, you know, made of even the leaders themselves, personal expectations made of the leaders themselves. But nonetheless, you have pointed out that there are a few of them who are really doing their best within the capacity that they can do. How do we, first of all, uphold those ones? You know, not discourage them, encourage them to do far much more, to say, these are the parameters, this is how far you're doing, and we think you can do much more. And how can we encourage the ones that are not doing as much to say, you know, you have to up the game. There is so much more you can do at your own level before we begin to look to the federal government.
I agree. For those of them who are doing well, is in situations like this, let the media do comparative evaluation, not go and collect money and write something nice about everybody. There should be a comprehensive evaluation of the governors today. Based on this they are writing, assess them one by one, 36 of them. What is school enrollment in your state today? What was it like when you came on? Apart from enrollment, what's the level of retention? You enrolled 2 million. How many are still in school? You're spending on school feeding. The purpose of school feeding is to bring children to school and keep them there. Your bill on school feeding has gone up. The number of children in school has declined. You see, you're then talking development. You're talking infrastructure. All I want to do is just grind pepper in the market, but I have to buy a generator. That's not nice. How has that declined? What are your investments in so many areas? How many people have you been sending for WAEC examinations and NECO? How many people have you trained for vocational education? And even if you did, are you monitoring them? In which case you can say, yes, some have improved. Some have even employed 1 or 2 people. That becomes the basis for engagement. So you use that. By the time you assess it, you see those who are outstanding, no matter the percentage they score. But you then come to those who are, like your question is, how do you then help or encourage those who are not doing well, right? You cannot encourage a cat to become a lion. It is a cat. No amount of posing can make an earthworm a species of python.
Oh, but
it is an earthworm.
That.
There are some, with all due respect, who have total capacity.
I'm trying my best not to laugh.
Who lack capacity.
Some people will, exactly, but you know, human beings are capable of so much more.
Yes.
Leadership can be taught.
I agree.
And people can be, so, I mean, when you say that, you know, there is no amount of encouragement.
You see, there's no governor today who has not been in office for at least 2 years. What are their reflexes? Many of these governors have been in office for 7 years. What have they done? That's where to start from. At this age, a few months to the end, you now tell them what to do. They already know what to do, and they've been doing it. Has their overall running cost been down? No. Look, all of them have been in office for not less than 18 years. Find out how many of them are in touch with the people who have served them. That's or whatever. Use and dump. It's part of the youth crisis. So, you know, sorry about my metaphors, but you see, the bat is not a type of bird. So when he comes out to fly during the day, he gets into trouble. All these people you're calling leaders, they are bats that came out when there was still, you know, the sun hadn't really come out. Now the sun has come out. They are flapping about because they lack the capacity to manage an environment with the full consciousness of what it means to develop their people.
Some will argue, though, that they have been constrained. We're taking this conversation to Lagos shortly, but, I mean, in terms of security, we've seen the agitations that have bedeviled the Nigerian state in terms of whether or not we should introduce state police, whether we should, you know, we've seen vigilante calls spring up in many different states, in many different regions. In the Southeast, there is controversy about the performance of Ibubiago. I think there is now agitation that, you know, that group should be arrested because they're wondering what the positive impact if any, of the group is. In the Southwest, it's a totally different story. Amotekun, you know, came up despite the resistance that it initially experienced, that there were constitutional constraints and governors had to keep explaining, but it passed nonetheless, and they have been established, you know, with some amounts of success. So it was seen that there are efforts in that regard. We saw only recently the governor of Benue State established some vigilante force, and he was he was saying on TV yesterday that he's written the president
for firearms.
And he's hoping that he'll get the response for that. So there have been questions as to what really can be done within the Constitution, especially with regards to security. And it was seen that they have had to be creative. States like Lagos have had to have their own trust funds just to fund their security outfits and, create some other agencies to support this, the security arrangements within that state. So would you say that, that governors haven't quite shown? Can you really accuse them of lacking creativity in terms of trying to solve the security solutions, regardless of what the Nigerian state by itself has thrown at them?
No. It won't be fair to accuse some of them, to accuse them of lack of creativity. But you have negative creativity. Ignorance can drive you to a form of creativity that's at best laughable.
What is laughable in the security arrangement?
Why would you need to create more and more platforms, except you first of all passed a vote of no confidence on the national security apparatus? It's been failing. Let's even take the facts. There was a call, repeated, hysterical, for the removal of service chiefs. They were removed more than a year ago. Security has worsened. They say change the Nigerian security architecture. Most of those saying that do not know the meaning of security architecture. If there's noise disturbing us in this studio and we can't have this interview because people are chatting, it's lack of discipline, not the architecture of the place. So you remove service chief, nothing has happened. Declare state of emergency. Supposing the president now makes an announcement, I hereby declare state of emergency on national security. What will happen? There will be no improvement in ammunition. It will remove the fact that the boys up north are too few. It will remove the fact that what should be done by drones is not being done. Kaduna to Abuja, 2 hours, max 3 hours. There's a drone with capacity for just two drones to cover that entire distance, weaponized. Another 3 between Lokoja and Ajaokuta. 200 drones will be too much for Nigeria. And the cheapest are available in Turkey. Officially used all over the world. Even the superpowers are worried that it's being made too cheap, etc. No, we're talking security. It is true there are constraints. Somebody will tell you correctly that the average governor is actually not the one to whom the police commissioner reports to. Even though he's supposed to be the chief security of the state. But I ask, is it true that we've had security for decades with that scenario and that structure in place? The answer is yes. The point is that there is, first of all, security is often mistaken for defense. What gives you security in your home as a father includes a couple of things. Your children are handled in such a way that they're not always fighting, so you don't have things to settle. Those who need to go to school, go to. So food security, environmental security, all of these things are ignored, and you carry people's children and send them to better armed bandits who are killing them. The north, southeast, and northeast, sugarcane, dates palm, wheat, fish from Lake Chad, all of that. If we're doing it, we have no time for banditry. We have no time to be bribed by bandits to do anything. So the full cocktail of what it takes to create national security has been taken. And on top of all, your understanding of security now is just about, shooting. That's where we are today. So going back to my notion of incompetence, ignorance cannot be called a school of thought. Multiplication of institutions does not lead to efficiency. It gives you a lot more bodies to manage. Ebubago in the southeast, it means the glory of the aura, the glory of the leopard. Of course, some people don't know that Ago is not lion. It's the leopard. That's a cat of the what you call of the rainforest belt. Its glory, it frightens you. A lion, a leopard is coming. You take off. It has neither glory nor capacity, because there was no consensus in setting it up. Remember, at the time it was being set up, 1 or 2 governors were thinking of the presidency. And so they were afraid of annoying the North, and therefore they didn't quite agree. All of that. What's going on in the Southwest is more commendable. Now, if I'm President Babangida, I will okay Otom's request. Sorry. Buhari. I will okay Otom's request. The Nigerians should be armed. his own state does not exist anymore as a state because it has been one of the most routinely raided of all African states in the last 60 years, and all of it within his tenure as president, including the kidnap of traditional rulers who couldn't be rescued for 3 months, the father of his own aide. Katsina State is the living scandal testimony for this government. Allow the people to arm themselves. Regulate arms. And you determine the caliber of arms. Pump action used to be under license. The Jivan sporting rifle in the 90s, I think, was still under license. Then I was still teaching in Union.
Is that really a solution? I mean, every time I look at this, I always ask this question, is that really a solution? For the people who went to church in Owo to worship, I mean, even if they had guns in their homes, the chances are that it would have been in their homes. They wouldn't have taken guns to church with them.
Let me disaggregate the narrative. You're in church. You can't carry gun to church as a regular you and I. There are no demons in the church. Even if you did, if there are guns, don't kill them. But if I know that you have a gun officially given to you, I'll be a little more careful how frequently I raid your area. That's at one level. Now, the level of the bandits is a national security issue. That caliber of configuration of forces passed through wherever they came until they came and operated. Where is preemptive intelligence? Do you get it? There are checkpoints all over the Southwest. Nobody saw anybody. Where is surveillance, etc.? So if we say, oh, it's not the solution, it will make us think that, oh, well, giving the people guns would not have saved them from the war incident. The Nigerian state has massive integrity deficit in terms of its capacity to make citizens feel they are citizens. That's the truth of the matter. At the level of security, it's not there. At the level of infrastructure, there's no electricity. At the level of, name it. And taxes are going up, fuel prices up. They're arguing about removal or non-removal. Who has been enjoying subsidy? And you're pulling off trillions every day. Those trillions are draining the limited foreign reserve we have, in earnings we have. Then oil theft is going on. Massive quantities are being stolen, so your income is decreasing. You're borrowing more and more to consume. That tells you leadership. Mistakes collecting money to spend for developmental programs. If you don't have more, borrow. If you don't have, and there's now a bill that allows government to take up anything you have that you didn't claim from the bank. What do they call it? Unclaimed dividends? Really?
Let me flip this conversation to my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mokwe. Well, Dr. Ikechukwu, it's interesting you mentioned the past 1960 earlier, because the other time, when we began the program earlier, Dr. Oyarino, our first guest, talked about the fact that the economic challenges we are having date back as far as 1966, and that it's not possible to divorce our economy from our politics. And since we are talking about the state of the polity, the question that comes to my mind is, what's your take on the structure of the system in 1966 converse to that of now? Because his opinion in the morning was, look, we destroyed or distorted the system that was working, regionalism that was working for us at the time, translated into a system we didn't prepare for, and ever since we have been struggling. Do you agree with that? I am assuming that you do. What then should we do? It's been 56 years.
Whether I agree with the switch from the system that was working in the 60s to what we have today. By that, I understand a couple of things, but most significant of them is then we had regionalism, we had a parliamentary system. Today we have 36 states and then a presidential system, which is far more expensive. My take is that no matter the position we take on this issue at the moment, it will not be possible, quite frankly, to sit down and agree to disband the 36 states for a simple reason. The beneficiaries of the current structure are more in number. Also, those who have got a certain degree of autonomy will not allow themselves to be what you call subsumed all over again to what they thought they'd run away from. I mean, you hear Dave Omahi saying from time to time that anything about Southeast County burning out of it. But let's look at the implications. Like you said, it's difficult to sustain. At that time, the entire 19 northern states, I think, yeah, that's 19, was just one area governed by one person. So the infrastructure for state administration constituted commissioners, among other things. Today, you have the same infrastructure multiplied by 19. That is cost. And in the midst of that multiplication, you have less service delivery, less indication of a sense of responsibility towards the people, massive and sustained underdevelopment. The Southeast used to, that's 5 states now, it used to be one region under M.I. Obara. Development was taking place. If you brought cattle from the north, it would stop in Omahe at Garki, Aba and all. It didn't walk through people's farms. You had the palm oil plantations. You know what was going on in the West? The same single government house administered those areas. But you know, the clamor for states was partly because of the feeling of further marginalization by intra-minority groups. And so we now have 36 states. And we have something that cannot work because most of the states are not viable at all. Where you have state governments that will spend 200 naira in a year, and out of that 200 naira, 123 naira came from federation account. Without it, they had nothing. But they are states. And you're speaking about state equality. And you speak about massive piece land as basis for state creation, no problem. But I don't know of a place where land translates into citizenship. So the criteria was set. The focus in state creation has always been on distribution of resources. Whereas the anchor for the regionalism that worked for us for some time was productivity, semi-autonomy, independence in terms of authenticity of the various peoples, and a competitive disposition. Look, see what we can do. Look at the North before the Civil War. Northern Development Corporation, the massive investments made by very intelligent leaders to develop their people. The policy for Ahmadu Bello University. Ahmadu Bello University went ahead to introduce a lot of programs that leveraged people. If you had very poor WAEC, you went to the School of Remedial Studies. With the certificate from the School of Remedial Studies, you could go to the SBS, which gave you IJMB exams and qualified you for direct entry. That's intelligent leadership. That's how people may not be doing this, but they... So all of that was going on. Look at the Southwest, look at the Southeast. Today, what do you have? Budgets are read every day, and everybody's complaining about Buhari. Governors who on their own should feel thoroughly scandalized if they have the capacity to actually assess themselves as leaders. So you have a governors forum you meet, nothing wrong with it. What has been coming out of it? What is their position on the elections? How many of them protested against the distribution of dollars during the delegates' elections from any of the parties? And these are leaders. And everybody picks on Emefiele. Oh, you know, do something about the value of the naira. Your habits make it impossible for naira, for dollar not to be expensive.
So, Dr. Ikechukwu,
yes, please.
Going forward now, if we took from the 33 recommendations made by the governors to Mr. President, would it be time to begin implementation of the Steve Oronsanye report, which has been said to potentially save the government about 1 trillion naira? And if in the past the problem in the delay of implementation of that report was, self-serving, this administration has less than 8 months in its lifespan. Do you see any willingness to be able to carry it through?
I do not see that willingness. I also do not see the capacity. I also do not think the environment is right for it. It will only cause further confusion. And one of the major attractions is that it will save the government 1-point-something trillion. Fantastic saving. But what has government spent on procuring vehicles for another country? The rail to Chad, how much did it cost Nigeria? Could that money have been saved? Are there any thoughts on some of the various subsidies, some of the expenditures of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs? Are they advisable? a continuous loss of funds to IDPs instead of fixing security. Is that so? When you're talking, if it's just a matter of savings, no. The attraction of the Russian report, in my view, is its capacity, the possibility of driving governance efficiency and effectiveness, reducing bloated administrative infrastructure, and, actually driving genuine development. But as for implementing it now, where will you start? The conspiracy against it is already overwhelming because some of the provisions which commence like, okay, if you've been in the service for this number, you've been a director for this number of years, you'll go, it's all been reversed. And so you think those who are benefiting from his violation, violation of his recommendations will now sit down and clap for you? Brilliant report. Orosanya himself has been, I hear, don't know how far, maligned and, taken on by many people who think, oh, we need to deal with this fellow. He thinks he's very smart. So implementing it now, no. If anything, if you're telling government to save money, please tell government to forget the planned census of 2023. That's a lot of money that's not going to be of any distance. Let them deploy it to genuine development.
You're positive. You're cocksure. We've been talking about how we need data to be able to do anything.
Yes.
The census should provide us with that level of data which we desire.
I agree with you. If the structure, administration, and intent and the infrastructure around the structure can actually deliver reliable data, let another government do that census. This government is overwhelmed by problems of the moment, of every minute. So leave census, please. Yeah.
Well, it's a fine place to leave this conversation. I know that it will continue in the coming days. I mean, we certainly are in the period where we'll be recruiting new leaders. We've seen the primaries of many political parties conducted, and people have emerged as candidates.
Are we really going to recruit new leaders? Or new people to hold titles of leadership and continue the old?
It's a matter of perspective.
I agree.
Okay, Kichuku, I have to thank you. We all have to thank you for coming on this morning. Dr. Okey Kichuku is Executive Director of Development Specs Academies and speaking with us here in our Abuja studios. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Well, let's just see if, yes, indeed, how will we not have feedback? I know we will. This is from Timothy. He says, okay, Kichuku talking about the governor's recommendation has hit the nail on the head. Let's interrogate the governors. How well have they fared in their states before pointing fingers at the president? I totally agree with him. That's from Timothy.
Well, this one from Suleiman says the states must demonstrate fiscal discipline in their expenditure and find other ways of boosting their IGR and sustenance. The problem of insecurity we are facing now in the country would not have existed if the subnationals haven't abdicated their responsibilities.
And Dr. Ikpemosa Uhumwavbi has a solution to insecurity. He says, proliferation of firearms in Nigeria will not stem insecurity. The solution to security challenges in Nigeria is in our political economy and sociology, not military. I wonder if everyone will be on all fours with Doctor there. Well, that's Dr. Ikpemosa's comment.
Well, this email from Oladiji says, the real challenge is our state of mind. Billionaires without visible factory or service provision chain, poor resource management, lack of capacity to lead, lawlessness, wrong philosophy of education, among others, are obvious disincentive to peace, sustenance, and consequently, the mess we are in right now.
Well, you guys have been great contributors to this show today, and I kind of think that, I mean, looking at the contributions, the lessons certainly are being taken. Very insightful contributions.
Absolutely.
Thank you for writing in.
Yeah.
I'm Maopel Yusuf.
Thank you for watching. I'm Bukola Samuel Wemimo.
I'm Aya Makinde. Have a wonderful day and God bless Nigeria.
I'm Chamberlain, sir. Goodbye.